Hello, people. Welcome to the community of the Growth Mindset podcast. Guys, if you are a first time listener, don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening from so that you don't miss on more interesting episodes coming up in following weeks. And for our daily listeners, here we are again with a new episode where we will interview another interesting personality from a unique industry and understand how they were able to accomplish this great level of success. Remember, this is a podcast where we learn easy, practical methods and tips that we can implement in our daily lives from the very best and the most successful people known today. Because as we all know, success leaves clues. And we, the people having the growth mindset, will use these clues to create a better, more fulfilling, and a successful life. So, let the growth begin. First thing first, Markku, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Markku, before we proceed and we deep dive into our conversation about personality types, would you like to go ahead and just give a quick introduction about what you and your company does for people who might not know you?
Certainly. Our company's been around almost 30 years. Actually, our headquarters are in Finland, and that's where I'm originally from. Now, that being said, I've been in the United States most of my life. I've been here since 1984, so you're still going to hear a little bit of hint of Finnish accent. I've been running the North American operations and also oversee UK and Singapore. I've been doing that since 1997. And as a global organization, we have offices now a little bit over 40 countries. So we have a global organization, and in combined, we have a little bit over 250 employees.
Wow. Amazing. And would you like to tell us about what DISC assessment is all about?
Certainly. Actually, there's a lot of people get a little bit confused when we talk about DISC model and DISC theory. And the main reason for that is that the theory was developed originally in the United States in 1928. However, the roots really go to Carl Jung's work. 1921, he wrote a book called Personality Types that really laid the foundation for all types of, they're called behavioral assessment tools that he created what's known as the four-quadrant model, which in essence divides all of us into four main groups. DISC theory was then developed a few years later, like I mentioned, in 1928. But as of today, the DISC model is in public domain. If you think about software, it's kind of like an open source model. So as a result, there are different companies, and I've seen many come and go, that have different types of tool based on the DISC model. Our product is called Extended DISC, and we have all types of DISC theory-based assessments, but we also provide other tools like 360 feedback instruments, survey platforms, and we do now a lot of work in looking at competencies primarily for salespeople and elite level athletes. And those tools have nothing to do with the DISC model or theory.
Interesting. Now, what are these four quadrants that we are talking about? You said everybody, all of us are divided into four different quadrants, right? What are these four quadrants? Would you like to shed some light there?
The term that was developed in 1928 were D, I, S, and C. Now, stepping back just a couple of steps, it's important to remember that all of us really have these four styles in us. And what Extended DISC instrument measures is what is our natural hardwired preference with different styles. But there's a D style, I, S, and C. Now, some people like to put labels. They often go D like a dominant or driver. I sometimes influence, S either stable or steady, and for C for correctness or compliance. We really, as a company, prefer to stay away from single word labels because sometimes that one word can really, in essence, get too much weight. Yes, it's true that, for example, these styles are direct in their behavior. However, there are many, many other ways we can really describe a D style.
So how would you describe all these different four quadrants? How do you identify what is the science behind Extended DISC, and how do you guys, make sure that this person stands in the D framework or I or S or C? How can one identify that?
Yeah, the science, obviously we go back to the original theory that has been developed now for almost 100 years.
100 years.
And now for our assessments, what we do is there's the original validation study from 30 years ago, but something that we think is very important, we revalidate the instrument every 2 years. But not only like many assessment companies, they tend to validate it for a certain country. For example, assessment tools that are developed in the United States, often they are validated for the United States. We validate it for the different countries. So for example, there's a validation for India and obviously many other countries as well. So the purpose of the validation is to make sure that the instrument measures what it's designed to measure. In other words, we want to really provide our clients accurate information because really the assessments are not the end. They're really a starting point. Really what we are trying to do is help people to create confident self-awareness, learn more about themselves, because almost all of us have some blind spots. There are things that we may not know about ourselves.
True.
And we try to bring those things into light because those kind of moments, typically when a person recognizes something new, are the greatest opportunities for us to become more successful. So we want to create that confident self-awareness, but we also want to ultimately help people, employees, to modify their behaviors. If I know who I am, that's wonderful and that's great. But now what do I actually do with that information to become more successful, whether it's my professional or personal life?
Correct.
So we provide skills to identify the styles of other people so we can get to the last and most important step is, now that I know who I am, I think I have a pretty good idea, let's say what my prospect or my employee is. How do I now modify my behavior in terms like my communication, my motivation style, my sales behaviors, or let's say leadership behaviors? That's where the value is really created.
Okay. And how can, let's say you've made a very distinct definition about, what exactly DISC assessment is all about and how this would help people. Now, how can one go and take this test and understand what their personality is like? Are there any few questions, psychological questions that you ask? How does that work?
It's a great question. And then the way it works is that our clients, they basically complete an online questionnaire. And when they start the questionnaire process, the first question we ask, what is your native language? It is very important that everybody gets to complete the questionnaire in their native language because the words that are used in questionnaires ultimately elicit a certain kind of response. Like, for example, word aggressive. In itself, the word has no good or bad meaning, but depending on who we are, we have different reactions to that word. Some people say, that's good, I want to be aggressive. Other people say, aggressive people, I don't really like them. So they have different reactions to it. But when we use the tool across different cultures and different languages, we cannot take literal translations like we're aggressive. We need to translate it to the language and the culture, the context in which the questionnaire is used. So then when a person completes the questionnaire in their native language, it takes about 10 minutes to complete. There are 24 questions that with each question you ask, what out of these 4 statements describes you the most and what describes you the least? And once they complete the last question, our system automatically emails the results to our clients. Sometimes they go to the person completing the questionnaire. Sometimes it goes to a facilitator, perhaps conducting either a sales, customer service, leadership, team workshop. And that's where the information is used to help people to modify their behaviors to become, as I said earlier, more successful.
Absolutely. Now, are there only question-based tests that you do, or do you also understand people by the way they talk? Is that also involved in extended DISC?
Well, the assessment is based on questions. Now, the way people talk, that comes into identifying somebody's styles. What we try to help our clients to do is that when we meet somebody, we look for patterns of behavior. And they can start as early as the first email I get from somebody. what kind of words they use. It's all caps, no punctuation, spelling mistakes, how long the email is. And that's just the one example. So we look for behavioral patterns to identify who the person most likely is. And once I use that information, I have a good idea how to most effectively communicate with this person, perhaps how to most effectively motivate that person. So to answer your question, we do look at those kind of things, but not in the assessment itself.
Okay. Now, what is the website wherein people can go and take your online questionnaires?
Well, they would have to sign up to become a client first, but if you go to North America, if you go to extended disc, DISC.org, and click on the contact page, you find out all our global offices. So you can find from there, for example, contact information to our office in India.
Okay, perfect. Now diving deep into the DISC part, right? The 4 quadrants that we're talking about. Would you like to share some more light on DISNC? What are some pros and cons of it so that people can understand or visualize what quadrant they fall under?
Certainly. And let's start with the D style. And like I mentioned, sometimes people use tribe or direct. These are the individuals who tend to be very decisive. Typically, they are very focused on their own goals. This is what's in it for me. They are what's in it for me. And actually, their favorite question is what? What's the bottom line? What are we going to do next? They ask a lot of what questions. Of course, they ask other questions too, but what is their favorite question? So they tend to be direct. Some people may find them even a little bit blunt or aggressive. They want to be in control. They want to be independent. They want to make decisions on their own, and they want to make them quickly. And they want their own results, not tomorrow. They want them yesterday. So they are pretty impatient as well. Upside is that they tend to be good in situations where you need quick action. For example, if you're in a building and the fire alarm goes off, you want to follow the D style out of the building because they are the first one out of the building and safely standing on the parking lot. So they are very quick to take action. Now, not only with these styles, but all the styles, there are pros and cons. The DISC model makes no value judgment. There's no good or bad. There's no high score or low score. There's simply different styles of people. But the D styles, sometimes they are too impatient. And in fact, in all of the styles, if you take those descriptors and you add the word too, T-O-O, in front of them, they can be too fast, too impatient, too direct. And the thing I see most times in business world is that their challenge is that their attention span is really short. If they don't get the results right away, often they want to do something else. Sometimes good ideas take some time to really develop and takes time to implement them. And sometimes they give up too soon.
Correct. And what about the ISNC style?
I style are the people persons. They want to be with and around people. They get energy from being around people. So they're very talkative. They are very animated. They are social. They are enthusiastic about everything, and they're very optimistic. For them, the glass is not half full. It's overflowing. Things will always be good. So it's fun to be around I styles because they bring a lot of energy, enthusiasm. They just love the interactions with other people. Now, the challenge with I styles is that because they are so people focused, they are too enthusiastic, too optimistic. Sometimes they lack the follow through. They're excited about new project, but once they get involved, there's another project that is exciting too, and their attention diverges there.
Interesting.
Also, details like working alone on some analytical work is something that is a challenge for them. So one of the things we tell lifestyles all the time is that just make sure you follow up and make sure you pay attention to the details. So these are more task focused, and the I styles are more people focused. S styles are also people focused, but they're focused on familiar people. They like working in teams. They typically have close circle of friends. Family is typically a very safe environment for them. I'm not saying that the other styles don't care about the families, but S styles kind of a family is their place of calm and relaxation. They don't need to go to parties. They're happy staying home with their family, and they get the energy from that. But they like to be with people, but they're not quite as outgoing and active than I styles are. They're very reliable, steady. The favorite question for the S style is how? How do we want to do this? How do you want me to implement this? Very long-term perspective. They're sometimes a little bit slower to begin, but once they start, they're unstoppable. It's like a train leaving a station. It's not like a Ferrari going to 0 to 100 kilometers in a few seconds. They start slow, but once they reach their top speed, they're almost unstoppable.
Interesting. And the last one,
the C style.
Yeah.
C style. They are the analytical individuals. They are more task-oriented, not so much people-oriented. So D's and C are more task-oriented, but C's are focused more on the details. They do not want to make mistakes. They do things very thoroughly. They analyze things. They love data. They love information. Because the thing that they do not want to do is make an error. Now, sometimes they're a little bit too focused on details, and they might focus on the trees more than the forest. But in every team, almost every team, we also need the C styles. And typically, it's good to have a kind of a mix of all four behavioral styles. You balance things out.
Correct.
Hopefully that was give you an quick overview of the styles. We have these kind of quick reference cards that our clients use that kind of provide a quick how to identify do's and don'ts. So even after doing this almost 25 years, I still refer to these.
My next question was around those lines. Like, let's say, one takes your test and then they identify that they are as you said, all of us have a mix of all these four quadrants, right? Now, some of them may have a higher version of D, some of them may have a lower version of I. It could vary over the places, right? Now, let's say I've realized that, okay, let's say I'm a D, right? Let's say I'm a high D, and how will this help me interact with the other person around? Now, as you mentioned that the paper that you just got out and you said you refer to this, how to identify people, right? What quadrant they fall under. So how can a person, once he understands himself, will be able to identify the person at the other end and be able to communicate better? Like, how can we identify who's the person at the other end, and what can I say that I could interact with him better, connect with him better, to maybe land a job, to close a deal, or just build a meaningful relationship? How can I do that? How can I identify those?
Very simple. We need to modify our behavior, how we do things. Disc answers that how we do things, and in order to us to have better interactions and productivity and rate of success, we need to modify behaviors. Typically, most of us go through our day essentially an autopilot. We communicate with the people the same way. With one person, it works very well. Typically, let's say you go to a party where you meet a lot of people for the first time. You strike up a conversation with one person. It's very easy. It kind of flows. It doesn't take any energy, and you have a good time together. You go to the very next person only a short distance away. Of course, now we're doing this on Zoom, so let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
So we have Zoom parties. Then I talk to somebody else, and almost immediately you find that it's a little bit difficult to have that conversation. They don't respond the way you expect them to respond, or the communication just doesn't flow, and it requires energy. It almost feels a little cumbersome. So that's an example when we are two different individuals in terms of our behavioral styles, and neither one is adjusting. Now, typically what happens is if we don't have the awareness of who I am and that other people are different and that I need to modify my behavior, things actually get worse. Because let's say, for example, that I'm a very outgoing I style. I'm not a high I, but let's assume for a moment that I am. And I meet more of an introverted C style, which in many ways have some opposite tendencies. Well, I want to go and interact with this Steve. I'm very animated. How's it going? Great party, this kind of thing. The C style, who's more detail-oriented, values data and specifics, may find this kind of small talk a little bit even annoying.
True.
So they don't react very well. They don't smile. They don't really engage in the conversation. So I'm an I style. Something is wrong. What's happening here? And what we tend to do is we actually start using our style even more, we begin to amplify that behavior. So I might be thinking, I know what's wrong. I haven't talked enough. So I started
Yeah.
talking even more and things just get worse. However, if I'm very conscious and make decisions about how to adjust my behavior, then I can realize, okay, this person is a little bit more calm. They value information. I notice they ask a lot of why questions. They want the details. And since I understand that I have no control over the behavior of the other person, in fact, in life, typically the only thing we can control is ourselves.
True.
So if I can control my behavior, make modifications, now essentially, even that we speak in the same language, now I begin to speak the same behavioral style language as other person.
Interesting. This is really interesting. Now, let's say if I'm talking to somebody and what are some basic questions that I could ask to identify what kind of personality or which quadrant he falls under so that I could communicate with that other person better for both, let's say for all the four sides that we have. You said Y for dominators, right? D.
See, yeah,
Okay.
the what question is for the D style? What's in it for me? What's the bottom line?
Okay.
I ask a lot of who questions. Who's going to be at the meeting? Oh, Bob is going to be there. I haven't seen Bob in a long time. It's going to be great to really catch up with him. Who else is going to be there? Because it's all about people. S styles want to know the how. How are we going to do this? I want a step-by-step plan because what I don't want to do is I don't want to let anybody down. I need to know how to do it so I match your expectations. And C styles, they want those details, information, data, things that are not matter of opinion. They are matter of science and facts.
Interesting.
So that's the one thing you can do that, but you have to look at things like their tonality. D's and I's tend to talk with a louder voice. Okay. Their eye contact tends to be more direct. I's talk the most. C's tend to talk the least. S styles, while they are, they like to be around people, they are much more lower key. Actually, the rule is if you can't identify their style, there's a good chance they are S style because they're really just kind of even keel. You know, they might have won the lottery today or something terrible happened and they look the same. And C styles are the most, the quietest, most reserved. They tend to prefer one-on-one interactions rather than being part of the group. There are many other things. You can look at somebody's office, how they dress sometimes help, but you should never base your decision on who they are, just one data point.
Okay, interesting. Now, since you've been in this field for quite some time now, right? Years of experience. So what, according to you now, we're having this over Zoom call, but is there something that you can pick up from our conversation? What kind of style do you think I have?
Well, a situation where like you are doing an interview, you are in your professional role. So like first I started looking at, you have some books there. They look like they're business books, but I don't really get a full view of your office. Maybe behind the camera, it's a very messy. Then I was like, okay, that might be a nice style. So maybe there's a little party area in the corner. That could be a nice style. So I have very limited information, and this new normal, as it's called now, when we don't have as much information available, it's a little bit more challenging. Now, I would be venturing a guess here. You probably, what we call it, the right side of the model, you probably can't see, but the D and I fall over here. So you're probably more on the D and I style. You probably have some S behavioral as well. You kind of calm and relax. If I had to guess, and I have to be very careful because I would want to over time get to know you better and really understand you better and then be more certain about it. But maybe the C style may be the lowest. But again, that's just a guess on a very brief conversation where you're doing your role as an interviewer on this program.
Interesting. No, to be very honest, I've taken a lot of psychological tests and I've done this test, right? So I've done this assessment as well. But when I did this assessment, I did get that, what you've said is actually almost really right as to what kind of personality I have. In terms of I am a little S side, and when it comes to C, I'm a pretty much very low on C and high on D and I. So which is interesting. And now, what got you into this field, Markku? I want to understand what piqued your interest into starting out in this field and becoming a CEO, president of this.
Well, I mean, it's not very it was not a planned journey. Let's put it that way. I was born in Finland. I came to United States, a high school exchange student, and my education was in finance.
Hmm.
I ended up getting an MBA in finance, and I worked in banking. All my family still is and was in Finland back then, and my younger sister became very ill. And to make the long story short, really ended up resigning from the bank and went
Hmm.
and lived in Finland to be with my sister for a little over a year. And while I was there, completely by accident, it was one of these, I knew a guy who knew somebody else who knew somebody else and said that you should talk to this guy because they have this tool called extended disk. So I met with him, and to be honest with you, um, I didn't get it, because I didn't have any background on this, and he was
Correct.
talking about D this and S this. I'm like, went right over my head, and I really didn't understand it. But I felt almost obligated to complete one of these questionnaires. I didn't really want to. I had no interest. It's like, no, it takes you 10 minutes. And, he was very, very kind host and, had coffee and donuts for me. So let me do it. And I didn't look at my report for several days, but once I did look at it, then it clicked because I was in commercial banking and I had around 40 employees, and I spent a lot of time dealing with employee issues, people not getting along. They would not understand what I hoped them to achieve. Of course, with some employees, it worked very well, but there were maybe about 25% of employees that I really had a struggle with. And then I realized, had I had this kind of information about my employees, about my team, my life would have been so much easier and I would have been more successful. And then I started thinking, this is something that I think everybody could use this kind of help. And I started the North American division in 97.
Interesting. And correct, right? Like, say, if I'm a CEO of a company or if there is a founder of a company who wants to identify what kind of personalities their employees have, and once they get that kind of information as to what their personality types are, things would make it more easy for them to communicate the way they want to be communicated, right? Rather than a CEO forcing his style, he'd be able to understand what different styles these employees have and then interact with them on those terms so that they could build a team that actually drives results and they're able to achieve together as a team, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So what are some other stories that you've seen this helping organizations? Can you share some success stories when people could relate?
Well, yeah, maybe just kind of piggyback, my story of being banking when we made loans to businesses for different, building a plant or starting something else, machinery, etc. The first thing we will always ask, let me see your financial information.
Hmm.
In fact, you just can't make a loan without information. You need that so you can understand, hey, this is a good risk for the bank. And if you don't do it, you actually, at least in this country, you'd be in serious trouble if you make loans based on your gut feeling.
Sure.
And as CEOs and anybody, like if we want to open a new plant somewhere or we want to move operations somewhere else, any kind of business decisions, the executives demand information to make better decisions.
Hmm.
Sometimes we don't have the data available and we have to trust our instincts and our experience. But when it comes to our employees, and many organizations, I would say majority of organizations said our employees are our most important asset.
So yeah.
However, typically they have almost no information to make decisions about what kind of employees should we have in our team. Like in sports, the coach knows everything about every player. Not only that, they know about the players of the competitors. In business, a lot of times we don't know much about our employees. We only know where they went to school, what kind of experience they have. Those kind of things. We don't know how they actually behave as leaders, as customer service people, as
Yeah.
executives. And that's the information we provide. So then it helps the executives to make informed decisions. And
Hmm.
I believe if you make informed decisions, your rate of success is going to be higher. And we see that, we work with tens of thousands of organizations in this country alone, from small companies with only a handful of employees to organizations that have over 250,000 employees. So, and they use it in different ways in leadership development, sales training, many other ways. But the idea again is that how do we best lead our organization, understanding what kind of employees we have? How do we bring it down to other managers level so they can be more effective? Teams can be more effective, and even the frontline employees can be more effective when they interact, let's say, with our customers or prospects. So that's how it really comes down to it. Then, of course, we work with government agencies, military, like we work with the U.S. Marines. They use the tool, help them there because high risk situation, a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Under pressure, it becomes very difficult to modify behavior. But once you understand how you react to a sudden stimuli in environment, then you are able to respond to it, not by instinct, but by making decisions about what do I need to do now so I get the outcomes that I want.
I love your explanation about how this helps or can help companies, especially the analogy of a coach, when a coach basically understands everything about his team members, what his personal life is all about, what is happening is school or college. And I agree with the fact that a lot of companies, or let's say people at the C level or even at the leadership positions, may at time would not be able to understand what each employee type is like or what manager they are dealing with. So understanding their behavior or what kind of style they have will definitely impact or add a lot of value to the entire organizations themselves. And as you said, you are helping millions of companies out there, millions of individuals out there who are trying to identify themselves and lead a successful life. I would definitely urge all my listeners to go to the website Extended Desk, take the test for yourself as an individual or for your company, and understand what you guys can do to truly become successful. Because once we understand that success basically is a decision that you gotta take and you gotta work on yourself, become more self-aware, is when all of us can truly succeed.
Yeah, it's a great point. I would add to that is that no matter what your style is, you can be very, very successful. So that your behavioral style has nothing to do with how successful you can be. The only thing it does allows us to realize that if I want to be more successful, what is the path that I need to take to become high performer at any chosen field or in personal life? How do I become a better parent, better spouse, etc.? I think the thing part about my role is that I've really had a chance to meet with a very, very high quality people over my career. And one thing that they all had unique stories, but one thing that's sort of a common denominator with successful people that I've been able to detect is that all of them are really self-aware. They're very comfortable in their own skin, and they're very honest about it. That this is who I am. I'm not perfect. I have some strengths, but I also have some development areas. And they're very open about that, and they're very calm and relaxed. And it kind of creates them the confidence that, hey, I don't need to be something I'm not. Now, what they also do is that once they realize that, they make a choice not to live their life through using the autopilot, as I called it before.
Correct.
Interacting with every person the same way, treating everybody else the same way. They're constantly thinking about how can I be most effective with this individual by modifying my behavior. And the last thing they often do is they realize that they have their weaknesses. Rather than what's tempting to do is hire and bring people around me that are just like me because they are easy to get along with and they tend to agree with me. They actually very consciously bring in people to their team and around them that are different than they are. And essentially, they do what I call recruiting to your weakness. And I've seen that constantly with successful people.
Interesting. That's a really interesting insight that I personally learned, because what I also personally used to think at times that, sometimes you need to have a straight approach. This is what it is. But yeah, it totally makes sense when you surround yourself with different personality types is when you learn about them as well. And you learn about your own weaknesses, as you said in the beginning, blind spots, right?
Right.
Interesting.
Like a hiring managers, I see it all the time, and all of our clients see that. Like when I worked at a bank and I needed to hire a new employee, our HR department would do all of the pre-work, and then they sent 5, 6 people for me to interview. And on paper, they pretty much look the same, same experience, same education, etc. So then I would have these interviews, which a lot of times ended up being conversations with them. And after I interview all of them, I would say, that person looked good on paper, but there was something about that person that I don't know. But this person, I can see us working together. Well, the reality is that they were very similar to me in terms of their behavioral style. So what often happens is that the hiring managers basically begin to essentially clone themselves. They have a lot of people who are just like them, and that is rarely a recipe for success.
Interesting. Now, you said you've met with a lot of highly efficient as well as successful people out there. Who is that one person that you really like, who's been killing it outside, and something that you really look up to, that this guy has done amazing work? Can you name any person like that who you really like?
Well, that's actually easy. Marshall Goldsmith. I mean, he's the top executive coach in the world, and I've really by a chance, we became friends about 20 years ago. And he's a lovely guy, has a great insight. I love his message about behavioral change, and he's very focused about his mission in the world to help leaders to become more effective. And he's also very clear about what he doesn't do. But what I like about Marshall is that his message and what he's teaching, actually people connect with it. Now, the mistake sometimes people make is that they think it's easy. Behavioral change, it is extremely, extremely difficult.
Very true.
You go to, online bookstore and look at the bestsellers. Most of them are diet or exercise books.
Yeah.
If we did what we know, all of us would be in a great health. We would exercise, would, have big muscles and run for miles, but it's so hard to do it. Same is true for changing your behavior in the workplace. It takes a lot of effort, and you need continuous reinforcement and recognition that day in and day out, I must make a decision and a choice to be more effective by modifying my behavior, whatever the context may be, one interaction at a time.
Interesting. Now, we're talking about modifying the behavior, because end of the day, this is what it all boils down to, right? Once you identify, as you said in the beginning of the interview, once you identify what your personality type is like, then the next important thing for you is to basically understand how you need to modify your behavior, right? Now, if I could ask you any three practical tips that can help people modify their behavior, not to a great extent, obviously, because this is an ongoing process. People need to work hours and hours with a coach or the mentor. But if you could give three practical tips that can help people kind of have a change in their behavior, so what those three advices could be?
Yeah, if I may make a fourth one, is that okay
Please,
with you?
Go ahead.
Okay, for four. So when we look at the behavioral change, the way I look at it is that it's a four-step process. First, we must understand and accept the fact that people are different. Not better or worse, they're simply different in many ways. And one of the things they are different is how they prefer to interact with others and their environment. Second is that you must get comfortable in your own skin. You must really look in the mirror and accept that in this world you have certain strengths, you have certain weaknesses, and everybody has those same things. I mean, it's not same strengths and same weaknesses, but everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses. And make peace with that. Let it go. Whatever you've done in the past, you can't change it. Let that go. And then realize that if I want to be successful, I need to really understand what this starting point, my behavioral style, really means. When you interact with people, if you don't have the benefit of their extended disc results, always look for behavioral clues to identify their style, and know that that's not a process that you do in the meeting for the first 10 minutes. It's an ongoing process, because you always want to get more data points to really be comfortable who they are. And then you get to that fourth step. Now that I know who I am, I have a good idea what the other person is. What are the specific things I need to do, rather than reacting to whatever they say? Kind of stop and think about what is the best way to move forward. Now, in the beginning, this takes a lot of work, but it actually becomes almost second nature. The only thing you cannot let become second nature is think that you got it. You still have to kind of make yourself aware that in order for me to have a better interaction, be more successful, value the other person, I need to control the only thing I can control, and that's myself.
Awesome. So 4 steps, guys. Make sure you guys are writing down, because I'm definitely going to write this thing down, put it on my board, because at least I'll be able to understand how to change and, change your behaviors and modify your behaviors. Now, Markku, if I could ask you, what are some really good books? Basically, let me ask you this first. Which are your favorite books?
Well, it's gonna be Marshall's books. Two of his favorites of mine are, one is called Triggers, actually, because you were kind enough to let me know that's his book, Triggers.
Interesting.
And it's a behavioral modification guide. It's a very simple process, much more difficult to implement. And the second one is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that book is really talking about, if we want to continue our path to improving our success, whatever the context is, the things that we've done in the past are not going to continue to help us to get where we want to. We need to modify our patterns of behavior, and he provides very specific, if I remember correctly, top 20 things that we need to change. And he has a lot of experience in working with the very high level leaders around the world. And I think it's terrific. Those are very terrific books.
Awesome. And if you had to recommend one book to the listeners to, at least at the beginning, understand about personality types, what that one book would be?
Honestly, there are not that many great books on that topic, because people have different ways of looking at it. If you want to educate yourself about the behavioral style, you can go to our website and there's lots of blogs, they're quick, easy reads, but we try to really cover different topics for leaders, for salespeople, personal life, dealing with stress, dealing with change, time management, you name it. People are telling us that they find those very helpful, and that case studies. And kind of looking into the future, we do weekly webinars. Then anybody can go and click on the events tab and click on it and register. And you don't even have to attend at the time. We'll send you a recording as long as you register for the webinars.
Nice. So people can come to extendeddisc.com. Is that the website?
That's kind of the main one in Finland. But if you want those resources, extendeddisc.org, O-R-G.
All right, guys. So make a note. It's extendeddisc.org, and that is where you can find all the information about, at least, getting the first basic information about personality types and how you can go to the next level. Now, since I know we are coming to, end of our conversation, there are 2 questions that I ask. These are some 2 questions that I ask almost all the guests that basically come to my podcast, right? The first question is, let's imagine now you've been very successful. You've helped a lot of people, achieve their level of success. But now let's assume 20 years, 30 years from now, you've grown old and your kids are growing up, they've grown up, and it's time for you to move on, to pass away from this world and go to the next, right? And you could give 2 advices to your kids. Any 2. It could be professional, personal, anything that you want. What those 2 advices are going to be?
First is be happy. Don't focus what you don't have. Focus on all the wonderful things you do have in life. When people get up in age, and I interact with older people, they are not talking about the cars they didn't get or the houses they built. It's all about relationship. When we will be at our funeral, the reality is that people around that casket or urn will not be your colleagues. There might be a couple of them. They will be your friends and family. So make sure you understand that friends and family is the most important. And second advice, believe in yourself. I think the key to success is to understand that all of us have gifts, and many of us, I said too many of us, thing that holds us back is not the external environment. It's the things that happen in between our ears. There are little voices in our head that are saying, I can't do this. It's too risky. We are a little bit afraid. Life is about solving problems, taking risks, and enjoying it. So I would tell my kids that, hey, go for your dreams, understand and get help from others to really define your own path and believe in your path, and go out there and enjoy the journey.
Awesome. I love the first one as well as the second one. The first one, especially the part wherein you mentioned the funeral part, where actually your friends and your family are gonna be the people that'll stand there, not your colleagues. And oftentimes I believe we get so lost in the hustle and the bustle of this world that we kind of push this thing aside and just focus on success. And whereas the most important part, as you mentioned, the first thing that you also mentioned is being happy and being grateful for what you have.
Yeah, and happiness is not a destination. It's not something that you reach. It's a journey that it's something that, you take, charge and you decide to pursue that every day. It's not something that you place um, things in your life that you suddenly have and then you reach happiness. It's something that we need to strive for every day. Now, full disclosure about the story about the people around funeral, that comes from one of Marshall's and my conversations. He told me
Hmm.
that, and that was one of the best lessons I learned. So I wanted to pass that on to you and your
Wow.
listeners, and hopefully it's helpful as well. It has helped me tremendously, and I'm very grateful for that advice.
I can tell you that you've passed that information to me, passed that advice to me, and I'm gonna pass it to a million others, because that is something that really hit me out of all the conversations I've had. I always preferred saying, yeah, happiness is important, but once when you actually think at the end of the day at your funeral, when you imagine that, right? I mean, it makes a lot of sense. That's heavy. All right.
Well, I think we often spend our day, so focused, like you just mentioned, on the things we have to accomplish, problem have to solve, and we are hoping that we take care of this, and then we have the vacation with our family. Every day, there's just many moments that we are really quite beautiful, and a lot of times we just take them for granted.
Yeah.
Often they don't last. Maybe a conversation with a spouse that is lovely and lasts for a few minutes, but in itself, it's a beautiful gift in life, and we really need to make sure we prioritize as they should be prioritized.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Uh, and yeah, going back to our last question, as the name suggests, the growth mindset, right? This is about people developing this mindset wherein they want to achieve, they want to learn on a regular basis. Now, if I could ask you for one tip that can help people develop the growth mindset, what, according to you, they should do?
Well, I mean, I'm just going to share what has worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it works. I don't think it works for everybody, but for me, it has worked. I always believe that there is nothing I cannot do. And I always accept that there will be adversity, there will be problems. Ultimately, if I set my mindset really focusing on a goal, I know I can achieve something. And when you have that belief, and unfortunately, I don't have any kind of a magic pill say how you develop that, except it is reality. I believe that if we just accept the fact that if we want to achieve something in life, we can do it. And it's very difficult to achieve our goals if we don't truly believe in yourself. So I'd say believe in yourself. You are more amazing that you are likely to be aware of.
All right. Uh, Now, this is one thing, basically I end my interview here, but there's something, since because you've said a very important suggestion or, an advice on happiness, I want to ask you this, because this is something which I want to get out of my heart, because this is something pinching me that I need to ask you. So,
Please.
what, according to you, is the purpose of life?
The purpose of life is to, in this again, according to me, is to make the world a better place, make some contribution. There's many ways to do it. Um, I kind of like the Buddhist concept that if you can't do something good, at least don't do any harm. So try to do your best to make it a better place, not only for you and your loved ones, but the entire world. There's many small things we can do every day that make an impact. May not seem as a significant contribution, but when more and more of us make those contributions, it can really have a tremendous impact.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you again for taking your time out and joining me.
You're very welcome, and thanks for having me, and all the best to everybody listening.